Hey everybody, welcome back to yet another world building episode. This is I think it's the fourth one we've done in July. This is 4 weeks on the trot here. We are going to be today looking at the third or the gold set of prompts in World Anvil's Summer Camp 2021 event. And for this event episode, it's already going well. I'm joined by Eden.
Hello, hello.
How's it going?
All good, aside from boiling and battling with the urge to melt into a pool of human mush.
Oh yeah, I feel that. I'll give a heads up right now for you listeners. It's an incredibly hot day here, and I've had to have the windows of my studio open, so there's going to be maybe a little bit of background noise because I'm basically right next to a road, but look, the other option is I die of heat stroke. So. Yeah.
It's not much of a choice. I think we'd rather have a podcast, wouldn't we?
Not a lot I can do. I mean, I'm looking at the waveforms now, and you can just see where the wind's blowing, where the microphone's picking it up, which is not ideal, but oh well.
See how much it comes through.
Yeah, it should be okay.
I can't hear anything on this call, but that's not indicative of anything.
No.
Somebody will have to tell us.
Yeah. Well, anyway, yeah, that's your warning up top here that there may be some background noise, but yeah, as I say, today we are looking at the gold prompts from the Summer Camp 2021 event. I mean, should we just dive right into them? I mean, this is the third set of 10 prompts. There is actually a fourth prompt drop happening. The final prompt, I think what they call it, the diamond prompt, which is just one prompt, but that's going out next Friday, which is after an episode would be released. So I don't know if we're going to do that one with an episode. But yeah, so this is the final big batch. We'll do what we did last time, listeners. We'll just quickly run through them, maybe make a couple of comments, and then we'll go back through and any that really jump out at us, we will go into further depth. So, a building associated with crime or justice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we haven't really done anything too much like that. I mean, you guys in that those first couple of story arcs did go to like the Eravale town watch, / jail house, but yeah,
I don't feel like there was any kind of overarching sense of like this is part of a structured law system or anything like that. It was just like this is the local place where the drunks get chucked on a Friday night sometimes. Kind of thing.
Well, this is the thing. It's a building, so maybe we don't need it. It doesn't need to be like a type of building. It can be legitimately just be like, it's the Eravale jail kind of thing. Maybe, we'll go back to where we began. A renowned pirate, highwayman, or other criminal. I mean,
we've got a renowned pirate in the game already.
We do already, and as I was saying before we press record, it's a shame that I already started the article on Pete Smiles because, that means I can't submit it to this. So we'll maybe come up with another pirate.
Well, it doesn't mean there isn't space for another highwayman or something like that.
Yeah, or maybe Pete Smiles' greatest rival.
Smiles rules the seas. Somebody rules the land.
Jeremy frowns.
I'm into that.
Yeah.
Just on broad strokes.
Well, we'll come back to it then. A unit or squad who guards an important person. I've already kind of got an article for like the Royal Guard, but maybe we can sort of talk about like the Royal Guard of like the Dwarven King or something.
Yeah, figure out the specifics of like a given retinue or something.
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, it is just as one squad or whatever, so it'd be like the elite guards or whatever, and says of an important person. It doesn't even need to be like a government person, really, I suppose, could it? But
somebody that needs to be guarded, and well, it really you can get in some weird stuff with that, where it could be like, what if it's a feudal warlord, and how does he train his men to be loyal compared to the nobleman, or how would a wizard have a retinue compared to the rest of them? Like, I think there's a lot of scope for different types of groups there.
Yeah, a settlement known as a pleasure town or for louche behaviour.
For Shadowrun, we'd just be pointing in directly to my face.
We're going to come up with the Las Vegas of our setting. That I think that one might be quite fun. We'll bring up the map for that and pick a place that's got a fun name and be like, this is the party town.
My mind is already going wild with the potential of magic and what could go on with that kind of stuff in combination with pleasure towns and whatever. So,
So yeah, that one's, I think there's a little scope there. A brave hero who hides a secret past.
Oh.
I mean, yeah, again, so much scope there.
Yep.
The next one, I think we actually, because I know for a fact I haven't started an article on it. The next one is a romancer, paramour, or other amorous individual. I thought maybe we could write about that guy that Prance scammed into painting him. Who was
Well, he was.
Yeah,
he was trying to put himself across as something of a Lothario type character.
Well, yeah,
wasn't
he was like putting on the accent to like put the moves on some girls in that pub. So, like, it doesn't say a successful romancer. In the prompt. What was that guy's name?
After fashion. I mean,
yeah, what was his name?
Oh, now that's asking a question. We're gonna have to get the episode description up in front of us or something. I would expect. It's been a little while.
Yeah, scanning through my head. Riang, was that it?
That's close. I think that might be it, but something in my brain's like it's close, but it's not clicking.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, anyway, I thought we could write about that guy for that one. Because it fits as like a sort of like him being a well-known sort of. I mean, it was even established in the episode that like everyone in the pub knew what his deal was. So maybe he's like a well-known local thing of like, oh yeah, that guy, he's always trying different schemes and things.
Yeah, arousing constantly.
Yeah. Next one, a large business, corporation, or trade guild. Okay. This is something. We haven't really touched too much on this kind of thing, have we?
In terms of codifying a certain kind of like, here's the businesses, here's the names of them. I think we've given the broad outline of that kind of thing where we've talked previously about the mining town in particular.
Oh,
the one that's right on the edge of the wastes. Where
I was thinking, sorry, the Dwarven town, although I guess that was Amy and I talking about Shalefast, because there's the Dwarven Trade Guild who basically run it.
There's two potential rival industries then after a fashion.
Yeah.
Like, not even necessarily rival, they could be part of the same network, but...
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's a couple of possibilities. A vital trade resource that supports a settlement or region. I mean, this could be anything, really. It could be like, this is cheese country, you know?
Yeah. This is the place where the carrots grow best, that kind of thing.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean to be a mining thing or whatever.
Well, resources are that's broad. Human resources. I mean, in D&D terms, would it be a place where it's like, hey, everybody's very fertile around here, so this is where we raise the armies from?
That's a twist on it I hadn't really thought. I mean, would you consider humans a trade resource, though?
Depends on what kind of a horrible leader you've got. I mean, we're living in some pretty bleak times where numbers and statistics are up in the air, so I can see that, like, during more brutal times... Yeah, the guy that can look at things and be like, I understand the nature of man, and thus I can manipulate it. And thus I have figured out that this place produces more able-bodied men for armies than any other. And thus I have decreed that this place shall be the place where I take my men from and what have you. Like, I could see that being played out on the right kind of like, amoral at best kind of leader.
I mean, I was thinking more along the lines of like tying it into the next prompt of like having like a special type of tree or something. Because the next prompt is
where we go.
An industrial, mining, logging, or other production settlement. I mean, we've come up with one or two of these already. So I mean, this is just I think another case of like, let's point at the map and go, what does this town do? You know, what's their specialty? And then the final prompt, a title which cannot be bought, only earned.
Well, that's, I mean, again, like the obvious thought is the good side of that, where it's you've carried out a deed, you've earned a position, you've got a place in society. But then the opposite side of that could be that you've earned a title, which means that you'll be welcomed nowhere. A title that means that you must be cursed to wander the lands or something because you did a thing, or maybe you were born under the wrong moon and somebody said, nope, that one, that's the name for that one.
He's a wrong one. Yeah. Well, as that's the last one, then let's dig a bit deeper into this one. Then, I mean, my mind went first of all to like the winner of a grand tournament or something. Like maybe it's part of. I mean, we've talked about like different festivals a couple of times, but like perhaps there's some sort of like local specific festival in one of the larger cities, which is well known as like this is the grand melee. Only, you know, everyone comes here, you know, the best warriors come here to test their strength and that, and yeah, against all who would face them. And I'm not talking like, they all come there and murder each other.
It's the classic grand tournament kind of setup.
Yeah.
I think.
And you're not going to win it. People come from all over, not necessarily just in like Valana. Like it's well known as like, no, this is where, at least in the region, you get people from Ashala or coming from other places in the south or whatever. It's like, oh no, this is the greatest gathering in the lands of, strong, capable warriors and that. So the fact that it is such a widespread thing, widespread sort of reach, means that it is tougher to sort of, you can't really buy your way to the top, because who knows who's going to turn up and put their sword in the ring, sort of thing. You have to be the best.
I like it, but how's this for an idea, just for broadening the scope a little bit? Because I feel like the grand tournament is like it's a classic thing. Like it's something that actually did happen, so like it has its place 100%. But I like the idea of like, could we expand this to other trades at the same time? So it could be like this is part of a festival where it would be, this is deciding the greatest of the last year in all things. So you could have the greatest warrior, and that's the grand tournament.
Yeah.
But then you could have the greatest farmer, and it's basically one part of the festival is this massive tournament. One part of it is the giant farmers market where the guy's got a giant marrow, and you've got another part where it could be the most beautiful woman in the land, or the woman that's bore the most children, or there's something along those lines in terms of like, what's the greatest magical achievement? You could have not magicians, but wizards, or other magic types being like, here is the new twist on a spell that I've created, and they're trying to get the kind of recognition as like, here's the most innovative wizard of the current age kind of thing.
You're thinking almost like a kind of World's Fair type thing then?
Yeah, like a kind of general, like, society comes together in one place to some extent, or at least a certain amount of local society could come together to be like, hey, we're going to kind of renew our competition for the next year, because that's what part of it would be in terms of the social structure, that like when it started, perhaps there wasn't as much competition, but year on year, bigger and bigger marrows, stronger and stronger fighters, that kind of thing. And that the people in charge can see like, this is healthy, this helps us, this is a very useful thing to have this kind of the champion of champions for all things, because everybody in our different villages, they might not see each other all the time, but they're quietly competing against each other. They're thinking about it all the time.
How would you think then that maybe it's not an annual event? Maybe this is something that's like built up to as like, which makes the title even more sort of kind of thing. So maybe it's every 5 years
or something, like once a decade, once a generation, perhaps,
once
to be
decade, like the grand exhibition or something.
Yeah. And it might not even necessarily be at exactly the same time every 10 years, but it's sort of like, we're approaching 10 years. That means the Lord of the Land is likely to call for the grand exhibition. Yeah. Because he wants to review what his people have been doing.
What's this title then? High Champion of the Grand Exhibition. Like if we're thinking that the sort of warrior thing is going to be quite a big, I mean, like you say, it's going to be a big event anyway, and there's sort of people who aren't going to be, there's going to be quite sort of niche little things where there's people who turn up going, I'm only here to see what the biggest dog is.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but the big draw for the crowds really is maybe this sort of grand tournament of thing, where heroes and anti-heroes and, people who shouldn't be messed with all turn up, and, so maybe that's the biggest part of it, is this thing, which is why the sort of the grand champion of the champion of the grand exhibition or whatever is like such a important title, because that's sort of basically that's going to guarantee you sort of renown and hero status essentially for life, kind of thing.
I'm trying to think of, like, I feel like there would be something in potentially giving it a noble tone, that if this is a title that's going to be applied to any given trade, that the sense of the nobleman has bestowed this upon me, I am now not necessarily nobility, but akin to, would be the kind of like social value for any of this, as much as the kind of recognition and what have you.
So what's like a low... Not really the term, you're made a knight if you're not already one by winning it.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily like, my mind goes to things like the Lord of War, the Lady of Farms, or something like that, but that's too broad. I feel like a specific word would probably be the better fit for it. What that word would be, I'm not sure.
I'm sort of thinking that like not every event is going to have the same title. This is sort of so the fact that like the combat part is such a big, it's the big draw. That's the big thing. That's the one. The winner of that is, maybe that's the draw of it as well. Maybe part of being the winner is not just the renown of like I won that, but like as part of winning, you are knighted. You're made a knight of the realm or whatever. So that's a draw for people who are trying to maybe escape a lower, from who are trying to claw their way up to the ranks of society or whatever.
Yeah, it would just depend on how many people are involved, because I'm just thinking on a 10-year scale, if you've got like 7 different villages from surrounding areas, then within like 70 years, you're going to have quite a lot of sirs and ladies.
Oh no, I'm talking like this is one big event called by the king, and people come from all over.
Right, so the entire... right. So that makes sense then, because then it would only be that like the top of each region would be able to even travel and afford the time to be able to try this, to try and take a swing at nobility.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking like a little local event. I was thinking like this is a big...
Okay.
Hence why it's every 10 years.
Flicking between the two, where it's sort of like, I can see the regional version of this, but I could also see where you're coming from, where it's like, the king side, where it's like, okay, yeah, you actually will be made a lord or lady of the land, or a sir, or whatever, a dame, whatever term it is that we come up with.
Well, perhaps there are regional versions, but like maybe not all in one event, but like a village or whatever, or a regional will sort of hold like a smaller kind of event, and then the winners go on to, not in like an official like you got to do this to get in, but like this is a sort of separate event that is close enough to it that this is seen as like if I win in that, I've got a chance in the in the big one, sort of thing.
No, my mind immediately goes to all kinds of terrible reality television, to be honest, with that kind of setup. But which is not a bad thing, because it's like that just proves the legitimacy of the concept. Like, it is the way that these things are handled.
I mean, to bring it back to the prompt, then, I mean, I think just champion of the grand exhibition. I think. I mean, we don't need to be more flowery than that. We don't need to add too much more into that. Because that's sort of like that's an exclusive enough title. Like, there is only one grand exhibition every 10 years, and if you're the champion, I say you're not only knighted, but you're kind of then the reputation boost. Anything you want to do in terms of like, you're pretty much guaranteed as like, if you're a mercenary, you can triple your prices and people will pay it.
Yeah, you've just gained stature and
you just sort of renowned as like, look, that's the ultimate badass sort of thing. I don't know. Yeah, but then again, I like the idea of the grand exhibition as like a big thing of like you say, there's something for every kind of discipline of like, oh, this is where the best of the best and everything come together to show off and compete, and and perhaps it's seen as like a sort of it's almost like a business opportunity. Like if you think you can compete, you take your wares or your skills there, and there's going to be somebody who notices you and things like even if you don't win, the fact that you made it there is going to open doors for you, sort of thing.
Yeah. That's cool.
100% not the prompt, but it's
in a broad. We've gone around the prompt and kind of come back to it ultimately. Like, we've got to have a reason to earn the title, and that's what we kind of lean towards there, I think.
Yeah, that means I just need to write an article about the event now, which is not going. Don't talk about the event. It's going to.
It needs to be a quick little thing, basically pointing to like the concept of the best of the best uniting in one place to prove it. I guess.
Yeah. I like that then. That I think is one to go for. Working our way back then, do we want to jump into like an industrial settlement? And we don't have to hit every single one of these.
Personally, this is one that I feel like you and I, because we have extensively talked about like mining operations and that kind of stuff at different points. I feel like this is perhaps one of the few that I could easily say we could move past, but if you've got any ideas...
no, I'm happy to move past as well, and the trade resource, really, to be honest.
Because again, I think Amethyst Isles, we talked at length about, like, I mean, ultimately that's us having discussed a trade resource at length.
And not even that long ago, really.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, I could write these 2 articles based on that crystal mine that we talked about last time.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, there was especially the underwater Oh,
the crystal golems.
Yeah, the crystal golems. I feel like that was a pretty unique factor to it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how I'll move that into the industrial settlement kind of thing. I'll have to go back and re-listen to what we talked about. But the idea, like you said, that it was like a sort of people come there to make their money in that, and there is money to be made and things, and it's a unique resource. And listeners, go back and listen to that one where we talked about the amethyst isles. It wasn't too far back in the feed. I think that covers those two, I think. So there's a large business corporation or trade guild. As I say, I kind of am leaning towards the Dwarven Trade Guild as a sort of concept. One thing in the sort of on our World Anvil page, and the setting in general, really, that I don't think we've really fleshed out enough is sort of, well, the Dwarven Society. I mean, we've kind of touched on elves and things a fair amount. Still a lot to be done there, but like I feel like we've talked more about that than dwarves, despite despite Amy and I fleshing out a whole dwarf sort of town. The kind of structure of sort of how the trade guild and things operate, and that is something I've kind of in my head thought, like I've said, there's the Dwarven Trade Guild, they're very powerful, but then that's about as far as I've gone, kind of thing. So I mean,
how heavily do you want to lean towards or away from established tropes is the thing. Because dwarves, I feel, are very kind of like they're in a fairly narrow niche these days in terms of, like, I think it was on a Penance thing that I listened to recently, joking about the fact that dwarves are all Scottish now. That's just kind of the rule. And it's slowly happened over the course of a variety of video games, basically setting the standard for it, as well as Lord of the Rings a little bit.
Yeah. I think World of Warcraft's a big culprit there.
100%.
I mean, I personally try and lean away from that, to be honest, mainly because I can't do a very good Scottish accent, but like, I mean, just for the fact it's a bit cliched at this point.
Yeah. I mean, ironically enough, Nikolai's excuse when tested on that was that he is Scottish and that he can't do any other accent. So it's kind of like we fall on the other side. So let's find English dwarves.
Well, no, I mean, the very first NPC on this podcast was a dwarf with an Irish accent.
Very true, yeah.
Because, accent isn't determined by, your species.
I feel like in media terms, like a regional accent gives a kind of implicit, like, just a salt of the earth kind of thing is what it's used for most of the time, where it's a really lazy shorthand that has, like, coloured a lot of people's imaginations, I think, in a kind of inadvertent way, where now in their heads, dwarves are Scottish and all noblemen are snooty people with posh English accents, that kind of stuff. Like, so we could really swing for the fences.
I mean, I think I don't think I've done just in general principle about not being able to do it very well. I haven't really done any. I mean, I suppose I'm thinking back over like the sort of mountain climbing one-shot thing and other storylines and things. We haven't really done any Scottish dwarves. I think I maybe had one as a brief NPC in the more recent story arc, who was in the cheese wheel rolling competition. But even then, like, that's one guy sort of thing.
Well, knowing so many Scottish people as we do, like, the largest part of me is just like, I'm not going to bring that thunder. I'm not going to open my mouth and try a Scottish accent.
I've said that a few times in different places. I'm like, look, I don't need any disapproving looks from my friends. If a bad,
I've heard a lot of what I thought were very passable Scottish accents in media, and then I hear people's reaction to them like, oh, fuck, my ear is not trained clearly. I can't recognise the difference between a good one and a bad one, so I should just steer away.
Well, it's that thing of, like, you watch TV shows and it's, or whatever, and then, like, I mean, this is, again, generalising, but, like, if you ask, like, an American to do an English accent, they're going to do either very posh or Cockney. And it never quite sounds right, ever.
I do like it, though, and it never bores me to hear a good Dick Van Dyking, quite frankly. Oh, hello there, Mary Poppins. How you doing? Happy apples and pears, me old governor. Oh, fucking hell, wow.
No,
okay.
but my point is, like, we know when it's not being done right,
Yeah. To get back on the dwarves, though.
So anyway, yes, I want to talk about the Dwarven Trade Guild, I think, with this as like a kind of quite powerful sort of force within the Dwarven Society, as like almost like they're not government, but like they run whole towns, and not in like a sinister kind of like this is a company town way. This is just sort of seems like, well, no, this is the way it is. It's the Trade Guild, you know. They are the, like, who else would be working for kind of thing.
It's interesting that they use the term corporation in between large business and trade guild, because I wouldn't really associate the notion of a corporation with a D&D style fantasy setting, but I think that the organized nature of dwarves and the traditions and all that kind of stuff could lead quite nicely into a kind of corporate mindset, even if corporatism isn't really a word to be used within a fantasy setting like that, where you could have things like trade licenses, classic stuff like that, where it's like, yeah, they control the industry, and like you say, they don't necessarily they don't own the shops, but if you don't have the right stamp on your gold ingot, then nobody's going to take your gold ingot. That's
100% what I'm thinking. They're not, like you say, they're not owning the businesses, but everybody, if you want to trade, you've got to be a member of the guild. So, you know, dwarves are, you know, they own their own businesses and that and whatever, but like you say, if they're not a member of the trade guild, they're going to have trouble selling their wares to other dwarves, at least. It might be that, like, you know, sell it to humans. So humans will buy anything, but it's a sort of, it's a mark of like legitimacy within Dwarven Society. I was
already thinking along the lines of Mark that, like, I feel like having something like a symbol or something that is the recognized, like the Dwarven mark of quality or something. It's like the Nintendo seal of approval, that kind of thing, where it's like, in the real world we have these things. I'm trying to think of a good one right now, because it feels like it was something that died out a little while ago, where brand trustability is not really quite what it used to be.
I definitely know what you're talking about there.
This is the mark of quality, like, you bought it from Marks and Spencer's, so we know it's good.
Or even go as far as brand names kind of thing. Like, I'm sure, you know, the reality of the situation is any number of products are made by any number of smaller factories and things for a big company, but you trust it because it's got like the Sony brand on it or whatever, you know.
Exactly.
There isn't one giant Sony factory, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. It's just that this is the stamp of approval that says, "Yep, Sony gave them the schematics. It's up to their standard." Boom. There you go.
Yeah. I mean, so I just pulled Sony out of nowhere for that, but you know what I mean. That sort of thing of like you trust it as a brand name, kind of thing, as like well, they make quality products, and you know, without having to think further about like sort of these components came from here, these components came from here, these, you know, or whatever. But I mean, I mean, brand name's slightly different than a sort of guild mark, but like, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Well, what's that thing like that sort of for like contractors and things? There's like a sort of...
Oh, I do know what you're talking about. I read something very recently, oddly enough. But I mean, it's your kind of your qualification almost. It's yeah. I'm trying to think of the right term.
I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, like a sort of mark that says like, no, we've evaluated this, you know, person and their business and are happy to put our seal of approval on it, kind of thing. But then on the other side of things, I'm thinking that this is a guild, so they do, you know, there is a sort of thing of like, well, if you want to open a business, you join the guild, you pay your guild things, your guild fees and that, which isn't 100% going to be a shakedown. There is going to be like benefits to it aside from like, well, yeah, no, because you've joined, people will now trade with you, you know. You will have, you know, if something goes wrong in terms of sort of, I don't know, the guild will have your back in terms of like kind of any hostile takeover attempts or whatever. And yeah, I don't know, there's benefits that come with membership. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah,
it's not a racket, but it's certainly like you're either in or you're definitely out.
Yeah, exactly.
I wish I could remember the name of the... I don't know if we actually came up with a name, but when we talked previously on one of these world building ones, we were talking about the notion of there being a black market network running down the rivers, and that one of the particular settlements kind of operated like as one of the ferrying points, let's say, one of the places where things are dropped off and loaded up, that kind of stuff, that perhaps this would be the black market of this world, where we're now establishing, like, so the dwarves have probably kind of like cornered the market on approvals, let's say. They're the only ones at this point that anybody trusts to say thumbs up or thumbs down on a given product. But there are people that are always going to fall outside of that either didn't want to or couldn't fall in line with their rules and regulations, and they're still going to try and sell their stuff, and that would just justify that smuggler's network a little bit. In my I'm just putting puzzle pieces together here, like, okay,
well, it maybe like
the world.
A part of a criminal enterprise is like, hey, we can provide counterfeit guild approval seals and things to put on merchandise.
Oh, maybe my mind's immediately just thinking, what would the design be? I mean, if it's dwarven, maybe some like bearded face or something. But on this counterfeit version, there's got to be something slightly off about it. Like,
my mind immediately went to the cliche of like 2 crossed hammers or something. But like, I mean, that's
just throwing extra stuff out there is just like that. That's a little bit of imagination fuel of like, I could spend a little while thinking up a funny little symbol to then subvert it to have it where it's like, okay, this looks very serious, but then they've done something to alter it where it's like, I don't know, it's a dwarven face with a black eye or something like that, where it's just like they're doing a little stab, a little nudge towards them, going like, yeah, we've copied your rubbish and we think we can get away with this too, because with that kind of, I don't know.
Well, I was thinking all of the kind of like you say, there's dwarves who got forced out of the guild or whatever for not following the rules or whatever, but because I was thinking there would be quite strict rules for, like, you can't be, they're on the up and up sort of thing, and it reflects poorly on everyone if there's dwarves committing fraud and scamming people, whatever, So there's ones who have been forced out of the guild who want to keep trading and whatever. So this is the black market thing of like, no, we can get you your counterfeit, like, approval seals or whatever. And the seal is it's seen as like such an unimpeachable thing that, no one's looking into it. They're just looking for the seal kind of thing.
My mind always just goes to silly stuff, you know me, but I'm just thinking of like the idea of it being like, okay, so there's a pie maker in a town and he said that he had the greatest pork pies ever, and it turned out one day somebody saw him catching pigeons, and that was the day that the seal was removed from the top of those pies, and he had to move to one of those crappy backwater towns, and he still sells his pigeon pies, his pork pies, but everybody's kind of aware of his past, and it ain't really working, and it's like that kind of thing.
Like, his business was growing and he was well known, and then this came out and he was disavowed by the guild, and now any upstanding dwarf who believes in the guild is not giving him their business anymore.
Yeah, he had a stamp for putting on the top of the pastry, but that stamp was torn away from him.
Guild approved.
He's still lamenting all these years later. That kind of thing.
Yeah, I like it. But yeah, this idea of the guild as a whole is like a sort of seen as a bit of an unimpeachable sort of seal of quality by it's obviously spread over the centuries to, like, for dwarves it's kind of like quite sort of sacrosanct, and like you don't question it sort of thing, like, oh, they're in the trade guild, they've got to be fine sort of thing. But it's kind of spread as this sort of seal of kind of quality of like, okay, well, this is guild approved stuff, this has got to be good stuff to like humans and things. I mean, and this is going to be any type of business sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly, and it's kind of like they've cornered the market on, as I say, approval.
Yeah.
They've just become the authority.
Yeah. I mean, and to the point where like the head of the guild is maybe on quite high up on the Dwarf King's council as well, because he's got to have their approval.
Oh yeah,
and things like he rules, but like.
The king would have to be interested in guild affairs in terms of just like he needs to know whether the country is operating correctly, whether they have the right resources coming in and out, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean, he's probably on a practical scale. I'm kind of thinking that the king doesn't just sit on his throne all day. He's probably quite well invested in businesses and things as well, sort of thing. I mean, maybe he does just sit on his throne all day, but he is quite well invested. So he's got, you know what I'm trying to say? He's got a vested interest in like, well, no, I need to keep the trade guild on side. They are the backbone of our society, sort of thing, when it comes to commerce and everything. Yeah. I think we're kind of dancing around it. I think this is, I'm quite happy with this as a sort of concept of like, this sort of big entity that's kind of, you maybe not seeing guild like enforcers or whatever, but it's this kind of unspoken thing of like, oh no, you got to be in the guild, sort of thing.
What have we come up with a name though? Have we come up with like a definitive, like this is the name of the group? Because I feel like the Dwarven Trade Guild is perhaps a little broad, but at the same time, this is very broad. So I mean, evaluators comes to mind. Dwarven, the evaluators, the high evaluators.
Well, I want it to. I mean, because it's a guild, though. This is the thing. I'm kind of like evaluators. Sort of. I mean, that is obviously something that they do. You know, they are. You know, people who do have to have. You know, they have to check out to be a member. You know, and they need to keep a certain standard. But it is still a guild, so everyone who's in it is in it, sort of thing. You know. So maybe. I mean, rather than sort of focusing on that, which is obviously a big thing of what they do, they are, you know, I wanted it to be more of a sort of wider kind of name, to sort of imply that, you know, this is the majority, you know, of sort of dwarf kind of artisans and any kind of business owner you're a member, sort of thing, or you're dealing with members.
So would you say then that this is like a guild above guilds? That this is the overarching kind of authority then? Yeah, basically.
I mean, it's tough to come up with a name, really, because I mean, like I say, I've just in my head been calling it the Dwarven Trade Guild, but like you said, that's a bit broad, and that is just like a sort of
depends on how authoritative you want it to sound. Because like my mind goes to like the absolute guild, that they are the absolute above all, and that all matters eventually come to the absolute guild because that's where decisions are made. That you can have your inner groups, you could have your glassmakers guild, your armor makers guild, whatever.
Yeah.
But that eventually things will come to them. I don't know if I like the word and phrasing.
No.
Because absolute guild just sounds it's
a bit
stern. It's strong. It's got that feeling of like, nah, you don't mess with the absolutes.
The Overguild.
The Overguild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe not even guild in the title. I don't. Yeah. I'm always tough at coming up with names on the spot, to be honest. But I mean,
I always end up going very broad. Like my mind just goes to things like the authority, which is just as broad as it could possibly be.
But that's quite sinister sounding.
It is as well. Like all of the ones that I come up with are like, okay, so this is like the slightly less moralistically clean version, where it's like, really, you want there to be some kind of historic event or something that usually is like there is the founding individual, the person that codified the laws, the one that was like the exemplar of being able to like, I suppose, be a merchant diplomat after a fashion. That would be kind of their role to begin with, would be settling those disputes. So there is a certain amount of like, it's not a court, or is it a court? It's there's a lot we could sort of like, in terms of the way it's structured, that would dictate a great deal of the way that it's kind of viewed and the way it would want to then present itself.
I'm kicking around like as a sort of thing as like, this is the, I don't want to say, I'm thinking of the Foundation, but then that's a totally different thing. That's a sci-fi thing. That's an Asimov thing.
The Foundation series, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, or like the Bedrock Guild. No, I mean, that's just Flintstones. I mean...
Oh, damn, my mind just went straight to, like, everything just went straight into Flintstones cliche.
Yeah. Yabba Dabba Doo is what the seal is.
100%. They're right trained lizard people, which can also speak and occasionally let people know that it's a living.
Oh god.
How did the Flintstones last for years when we seem to have like the one note is literally like we've just covered it in about 3 minutes there, if that.
That's basically I don't know. Look, I guess there was less stuff.
Oh, let me think. Oh, I'm racking my brain
for a name, but like as in like a kind of where I was thinking with like foundation is like this is the foundation of our way of doing things. The Stone Foundation. I don't know. No,
I feel like it would want to be something to do with measurements or setting limits on things. That it's
Department of Weights and Measures.
Well, that's what comes to mind straight away.
Yeah.
It's just like, I mean, that's ultimately what their purpose would be. Is like if they're a trade corporation that's deciding whether goods are fit for sale, then
well, it's kind of part of that, part like Company's House, part like I feel like we're spending a lot of time trying to think of a name here.
And my mind goes to all these terrible like Britishisms, like the really bland, horrible things like the Trade Authority and stuff like that. It's just like, it just sounds dull and horrible.
Yeah. I think there's something to think. Okay, I'll keep thinking outside of the episode. Let's move on to something. We've got the basic concept there, I think.
If anybody, I'll throw this out there. I mean, you can always edit this out if you disagree, but if anybody's got an idea on that, I'd be interested to hear it.
Yeah,
if you've come up with an interesting name for a trade guild, then best of luck.
Let us know on the Discord server. Let's do a mid-episode Discord server plug. Yeah, we don't get these very often. Join us on Discord. We talk about all kinds of things, and we have a world building channel on there. You can get involved and give us your thoughts on these things.
There's a whole bunch of different stuff going off on the Discord.
Yeah.
Join us for different games, and
you can get to it there's a link in the bio of our Twitter page, and if you don't really use Twitter or whatever, you can go to the contact page on our Podbean site at pretendingwithdice.podbean.com. There we go. Slightly professional.
That's possibly the smoothest promotion that's ever occurred on this podcast.
This is all I need to do. We need to crank the heat up so my brain doesn't start throwing in other stuff and be like, no, just do the promo. Get on with it.
I don't have time for secondary thoughts. I'm just on one track right now.
It's too hot to worry. Okay, so moving back up the list then. A romance, a paramour, or other amorous individual. I mean, I want to write about that Riang guy. I think he was a kind of funny character that I kind of pulled out of nowhere. The infamous portrait artist who drew Prance while he had Apollonia covering his parts. I mean, so much of that stuff where you guys went into that village was like that city, like is some of my favorite stuff. But it really was a case of like, oh, we're going in the city. Okay, shit. Like every single person you ran into was me going, oh, it would be funny. And that was about as far as my pre-planning went. Was 2 seconds before being like, it's this guy. Like,
there was definitely a session where with hindsight, if I'm honest with myself, I feel like I pointed us for the bushes a couple of times, and thankfully we stuck the landing quite nicely.
Well, that guy, I think I gave you a few options because you got left alone in the pub when Enade and Bork went to the shop. And I gave you a few options of different people to talk to. I'm trying to think because it was a couple of years ago, obviously, at this point we recorded that. But I think another option, there was a pair of elves who were kind of hunched over a map, and you kind of botched a charisma check to sort of persuade them to... I kind of
went up and went, what's on the map, guys?
Yeah.
They weren't into that.
They weren't impressed, but I think I gave you like a sort of like persuasion check to like convince them that, they wanted to talk to you, and you kind of fumbled it. So it was like, well, okay, no, to them you're just a randomer who's walked up and is trying to get involved, so that's not happening.
Yep.
I don't know where I was going to go with that, but like, it was just a case of like, okay, I need 3 or 4 different like little seeds here that like as we go I can just spin into something. And this guy who was like, I don't know how I described him as like a guy he's like a dwarf. Was he a dwarf or was he a halfling? I think he was another halfling.
I think he was a halfling,
yeah, who was just bothering 2 ladies. I think
I
think that was basically it, and
himself to be for a change strangely noble and step in if memory serves.
Yeah.
So, hey, you want to do a painting? You can paint me, and then force it, which is always fun.
Well, that was his kind of like play, wasn't it? So the basic concept I think of the character in my mind, then to expand on it, is that he's sort of in a non-sinister way is well known in, at least in that pub or maybe in the area, as like he's always got an angle. He's trying a new thing to try and pick up the ladies, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And you just happened to run into him when this month's current thing was like, I'm going to put on this accent and pretend to be a painter, and ladies want to be painted, surely. because I think I even said like it was not a good painting. Like,
yeah. It would stick for bigger levels.
But like he's so committed to the bit that he bought canvas and everything and paints and things and was going to make a go of it. Like he was fully committed to like if he convinces somebody to come back to his small little hovel, like he was going to try painting them, but like while continuing his sort of play. And and again, I'm not thinking that he's like a sinister character. I mean, obviously it is kind of a bit of a creepy thing to be like, I'm going to try and trick people into, you know, sleeping with me, whatever. But I kind of think of him kind of almost as a tragic comic character of like...
He doesn't succeed, particularly.
He's got
especially that lone factor.
Yeah.
Like if he walks into the pub with a different accent, most people are going to raise an eyebrow and probably have a little smile after themselves as soon as he's walked away. Like, oh my god, have you seen what he's doing this week?
Yeah, basically, yeah. So he's like I say, it's kind of like a thing of like people roll their eyes and go, oh god, here we go again, kind of thing.
I like that in true terms, he really was a struggling artist because he was struggling to create anything artistic.
Yeah, definitely. But I don't know. I just thought, again, on the day, I think my idea of the character was just like, okay, here's a guy he's a little halfling guy who's trying it on with these two ladies. He's put on an accent. He's pretending to be a painter. I might not even have thought initially that he was pretending. It just then, as we went on, I was like, it'd be funny if he wasn't really a painter, wasn't it? Or like, it'd be funny if this wasn't his real voice. As we were going, because I was doing like a fairly bad Antonio Banderas impression.
Yeah. Well, it started off. Well, I mean, when the characters met, he could easily have been legitimate, but then obviously you found the right nice wrinkles there to add some flavour to him and to actually create a scenario where it actually built up to something, and it really did.
Well, here's the thing. I think in my head, I think he was legitimate right up to the point where my brain went, it'd be kind of funny if he was just like, you know, just like a local guy who's putting on an accent to try and do things, but then you charmed him and he stuck with the accent until the charm wore off and he realised that he'd been charmed. Yeah. So I mean, that's how my brain went. It was like, be funnier if it was this. So I changed it in the moment, kind of thing. But I do think it is better this way, that he's just this kind of local guy who's just sort of like, he's got it in his head. I'm like, no, this is one of the great cities of the land. There's people coming through all the time, and I love the ladies, kind of thing. And like a sort of not in like he's not as bad as Quagmire kind of way.
Yeah, I feel like it'd be the kind of thing that if you could get an honest conversation out of him and sit down and just be like, so why do you do what you do? He'd just be like, I've tried every trade. Nobody wants me. Like, I
just want to be loved.
Yeah. Either that, or he could be like along the lines. I mean, it's a bit of a weird reference, perhaps, but do you remember the bit in Napoleon Dynamite where he talks about the fact that girls love guys with skills? He says something to the effect of like, you've got to have skills. You've got to have some skills, otherwise the girls won't like you. And I kind of like that conceptually. It's just like Riang's convinced that like he wasn't even trying to be like dirty or anything. He was genuinely going to try and paint a picture of these girls.
Yeah.
But that was the limit of his talent. And that like, had they actually been tricked into it, they'd have been way more disappointed than Prance was, that's for sure.
Maybe he's convinced himself that no one could love him for him.
Yeah. And every week he tries something new. He tries a new trade, but because he's never dedicated to anything, he never sticks to anything. He's become this kind of running joke of like, oh, what's it this week, Riang?
So leave me alone. This week I am a painter.
Yeah. I must think and brood.
And then like 5 minutes later, you guys walk into the pub, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's, I think, as a character, it's probably someone you guys won't run into again. Or if you do, it'll be it'd be a funny thing of like, oh, he sees you coming and just packs up and leaves, kind of thing. Or he's annoyed at you for, or maybe he forgets you. He's forgotten you completely. Maybe he strikes out so often, he has so many run-ins with people who mess with him or whatever. He's
like
completely forgotten.
Get naked Prance.
Yeah.
In fairness, that's probably going to haunt him in some way, shape, or form. I've never truly described what Prance is like under his robes, but I don't
think we need to really go into. Super.
He's an aging man who's lived a hard life. and has played with a lot of fire. That'll probably inform thoughts.
I like the thing as well is for you, that painting is 3 days old and is nice and fresh, but who knows how long time has passed outside the bubble. Yeah. But, you know, for you, like, you ran away with the painting, went and hid down by the water for a bit after you got in an argument with Emily. And then you guys went to Wild Meadow, and then you've been there from your point of view not that long.
Leave scope for, I mean, I'll leave it in your hands. You said we won't run into him, but that leaves scope.
No. I'm just thinking of like
what they're doing by now.
It's a big city, and it depends where you decide to go, when we pick it up or whatever, and what we end up doing with you know, overarching story wise or whatever. You know, we'll see what happens. We'll leave it at that. He's a minor NPC that was created as a joke and was in one episode.
And this is the way characters happen to sort of eventually crop up in everything.
Yeah.
Background characters in all kinds of TV shows eventually have an episode.
Oh, yeah. I mean, The Simpsons is, you know, rife with characters who are in the background in season 1, and then you jump forward 10 seasons and it's a whole episode with the sea captain or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. How long have we been going? We've been going 50 minutes. A brave hero who hides a secret past. I think I'm happy to sort of skip over this one for now. There's a lot of scope there.
It involves we'd have to come up with a defining event for that person, and that involves creating history and all the rest of it, which we've already talked a lot about in terms of setting up certain things.
That might be one that, if I do get to it during, you know, when I'm writing up articles, I would have to sit down and basically think of something that this is a character. It's either a character from history, or it's someone you guys haven't run into yet, or it's something like that. That's going to take a bit more work.
Yeah.
So a settlement known as a pleasure town or for louche behaviour. I mean, I'm thinking kind of coastal, sort of like, I don't know, like holiday town kind of thing. But then also a little bit further away from other stuff. So maybe we cross into Ashala for this one.
Yeah.
You know, it's further in the south, maybe not all the way to the south because I haven't filled in a lot of dots or whatever. But obviously things are going to be a bit warmer. I have got the one named there, Mer Bleu. It's like a kind of coastal town. Maybe it's well known as like, oh, you know, this is, you know, and the people. It's kind of like got legendary status of like, oh, you know, anything goes in Mer Bleu. You know.
It's the riser of our place. Yeah. It's hard not to think in terms of those, like, there are some fairly established things within, like, fiction and what have you, for, like, pleasure towns and what have you. But is there a specific angle we could come up with to make it particularly, like, is it just a place that people go to and bang, basically? Or is it something a bit more esoteric than that? Is pleasure less defined by pleasures of the flesh, although that could be part of it, and could simply be that, like, it's a place for leisure generally. Like, you can, I don't know, because sports and that kind of like arranged stuff, you'd have like village sports, I would expect, but I wouldn't expect there to be necessarily, like in D&D land, like there's no football, there's no baseball. I wouldn't have thought that's like spread across the world unless you want that to be, in which case maybe you could have it where it's like, yeah, this is the place to go and do that thing.
Well, I mean, we'd previously said that like the way Ashala works compared to Valana is Ashala is more sort of every kind of town has its sort of baron kind of thing. So while it is one nation, it's a bit it's kind of moving towards being a bit more of like a, you know, one cohesive nation. It does still have this kind of thing of like each town kind of almost sets its own sort of rules and things.
That would make sense then for it to be, for this pleasure town or this leisure town to be on that continent.
I mean, and it is just, I am thinking it is kind of like, I mean, it's a seaside town, you know, in like a warmer part of the continent. So there's plenty of kind of activities and things to do. It's in a fairly safe place, really. It's only sort of 40 miles from the Ashalan capital kind of thing. And maybe the current Baron or whatever, this is maybe a more recent development, like the current Baron, whether he's a Baron or, you know, whatever he is a bit more of a kind of, I don't want to say fun-loving guy, because that just implies like a dude who likes like wacky shirts or whatever. But I mean, like, he is a bit more of a kind of hedonist kind of thing, and he has sort of almost put it about of like, Mablu is the place to come if you want to, you know, let loose. We are open to all kind of thing. You know, he's sort of, he's almost kind of instructed his guards like, oh no, take it easy, boys. Sort of
would
thing.
It be the kind of place then that would have kind of laws potentially to say like, your faction worries, your fights, that stays at the door. If you're traveling to this place, then it's a known, like, this is a truce area. This is we don't get involved with the fights. If you're coming here, it's just to relax. And we understand that in the middle of a long war, maybe the generals need to get away from the front line for a while. They're like, they could offer themselves as a sort of like Switzerland of leisure, almost.
I'm just kind of thinking of like a sort of, it's generally like you say, a kind of people. Maybe people are coming here to sort of like escape some troubles. Not escape troubles like they're being chased. I mean, just like, you know, this is a nice place to just get away from it all for a while. And maybe this Baron is just sort of like, he still, the guards still investigate like capital crimes. Like, you know, there's definitely, like, you can't just turn up and be like, I'm going to go on a murder spree because you can do that here. Or like, I'm going to steal from people. You still can't, you know, thievery and things, you know, they're still against the law. But there's a bit less judgment for most everything else, you know, and people kind of just let each other. It's more of a state of mind than anything else. Of like, okay, no, we can come here, and it's a you know, this is a place to maybe let some of our social sort of social mores kind of like let our guard down a little bit and just sort of
there's a local nudist beach, that kind of thing.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, not specifically. I wasn't like, right, we're making a nudist beach. This is exactly where we're going with this prompt. But you know what I mean? Like, this is a bit of a sort of like, okay, it's hey, we're in Mablu, anything goes kind of thing. Yeah. You know,
you might find like a lot of good pipeweed shops in this place, that kind of thing, or like a lot of things that might be like habits in other locations are just kind of like, yeah, it's all good here, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they're a bit more relaxed on sort of that kind of stuff. Sort of thing, like, provided you're not hurting anybody, it's pretty cool here, sort of thing. And maybe as a result, like, there are more neighboring ones, like, you know, I'll say they're not too far from Eternity. I don't know, I just put accents on ease. The capital of Ashala, and maybe there is like a bit of a sort of disapproving sort of like, you know, I wish these people would act a bit more civilized kind of thing, but like, it, you know, while at the same time going there themselves and partaking, sort of thing. But you know, it has got the sort of reputation of like, this is the place to go to unwind, sort of thing, and without judgment. You know, obviously the sort of, especially I'm thinking like, well, when we've previously talked about kind of Ashala being like a land of kind of royal courts, and there's a lot of, you know, courtly intrigue and that and everything. So I mean, it would make sense that, you know, a place where intrigue isn't so, I don't know, you need a place to get away from it all, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, in terms of like a place that lasts for long enough, there's always going to be the factor of like, if people are getting trashed in this place and it becomes known as a place to cut loose, that eventually loose lips are going to lead to information passing hands, and that perhaps the Lord of the Land has a little side business on that front or something like that, where for the right amount of money and with the right connections, you can have a chat with him and find out what the local baron's son did when he visited, that kind of thing. So you might be away and like use that, but it would all be hush hush. It's all going to be under the table, like, and only at the highest levels, because you can't have the common man knowing that they can't just relax and cut loose. Otherwise, you'll never get that information. Yeah,
like he does legitimately have this sort of thing of like, oh, I you know, I like my place being a place people can relax and that. But at the same time, like you say, he's got ears everywhere.
Yeah, there's got to be a way of maintaining power within that structure. Then,
because
the information brokerage trade would be the angle.
Yes, which gets him leverage at court and everything and things, and yeah. So it is a bit of like a sort of with one hand offering, sort of offering relaxation while at the same time harvesting your data kind of thing.
That might be where you'd have some of those sort of like people that would be seen as moralizers in the public eye potentially might have more insight to be like, no, this is why we shouldn't be going there. We shouldn't be indulging this. Like there would be certain rivals that would be like, no, that place, I would never let anybody from my lands go to there because I know what happens.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to build on there. I think I don't think we need to go into any more depth than that. Just as a place of like, for most people, it is just going to be a relaxing place and that. But like, there's obviously certain people he's going to want to find out what he can about what they're up to and things, and this is a perfect sort of front for that of like, people come here, they let their guard down, they have a couple of drinks, they maybe let a few words slip about what they've got planned over the next year in terms of things, and now I know about it too.
That's it.
Yeah.
It would have both the genuine aspect of people going there for true relaxation, but then there's going to be that little angle where it's always there's always a little bit of darkness in the light, as it were.
For sure. Yeah. I think that's pretty much a good starting point for that one. So there's three more to kind of go into. Depends if you want to look at come up with something for all of them. A unit or squad who guards an important person. I mean, we talked about the Dwarven King. I think just having like his personal guard, I think I'll come up with some stuff for that. Maybe we don't need to. I don't know.
I feel like the choices that you can make on that kind of stuff in terms of defining it would be like, what's the fighting style? What's the regiment? How do they train? Like, it's all kind of very specific to how they're militarized and how they're above the other units, as it were. Like, why are they the personal retinue of an individual?
Yeah. Call them like the deep seers or something. Although that's a bit more of a kind of mystical sort of feel to that. But they're always the Deep Watch or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Something along those lines.
Yeah. A renowned pirate, highwayman, or other criminal. So I mean, we could do it a highwayman, but I kind of like the idea of like coming up with a rival pirate for Pete Smiles. Okay. I don't know. What do you think?
With Pete Smiles being kind of like a slightly tongue-in-cheek character, I think will be fair to say.
Yeah.
Are we staying in that frame of mind for a rival, I suppose?
Yes, I think once you hit the high seas, there's room for ridiculousness.
Because I think that in that case, then we need to be going for like polar opposite archetype type stuff, where it's going to be like the dread pirate something, and he's going to be angry and upset all the time. Like Pete Smiles is the nicest guy on the oceans. There's got to be the nastiest.
Well, I was thinking that also as well. You've got he's kind of like you say, he's the nicest guy on the ocean or whatever. I don't know if that really came across when I was playing him on the thing, but like that was kind of what we're going for, wasn't it? I mean, cards on the table. I think we said before he grew out of a Jackbox joke.
Of all things to have spawned a character, yeah.
I mean, look, that's happened a few times.
Yeah. And nothing. I mean, really, there is no foundation for it. Pete Smiles was just something that somebody said that made all of us laugh pretty damn hard because it was so stupid.
Yeah. But I'm picturing. I don't know where I've seen it. I might even be thinking a Hook, but like a sort of properly kind of done up, again to dip back into the Ashalan nobility thing, but like face powdered, sort of
curly wigged.
Curly wigged kind of sort of his like kind of counterpart kind of thing, who thinks he doesn't have he's not kind of doing it properly, sort of thing.
So admirals and like ranks come to mind when it comes to that kind of an individual.
Yeah, although still like maybe he used to be in the Ashalan Navy and he took his ship and his men and they deserted and now they ply the high seas with an inflated sense of self-importance.
Yeah. Oh, I'm trying to think. I don't necessarily have like a name for him, but like, would the title Free Admiral work, do you think?
Free Admiral, yeah. Like it's going to be like a self-proclaimed title. So
yeah, and that kind of captures a grandiose kind of like, I have loosed myself from the chains of authority. I am now the authority. I am the admiral.
But then I'm also thinking of like a sort of stereotypical like French name kind of thing. Like, this is the kind of vibe we want to go for.
I'm just racking my brain for like a good kind of like slightly punny name on like being in a bad mood or being an asshole. That's something on that line.
Well, or even like a kind of slightly silly sort of sounding name, but like he is kind of the sort of classic thing of like, it sounds silly to everyone else sort of thing, but he doesn't see what the joke is.
The old hyacinth bouquet.
Yeah, well, that, or like what's it in Life of Brian? Biggest Dickus.
Biggest Dickus.
But like the free admiral. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard.
Again, we're putting ourselves on the spot to come up with a name on that, but like, I think, coming up with like a rounded concept, I think, is more important here.
Yeah.
As we've got so many prompts and that, like, coming up with good starting points, I think, is the name of the game here. And yeah.
So in broad strokes, then, so we've got the idea of like this guy has loosed himself from the authority, and he's a rival to Peace Smile. So, like, if he's got nobody to back him and he's got to run a ship, then is he effectively like? Is he somebody that would once have fought against pirates who has effectively become one, but is in denial?
Yeah. Like he's just seeing himself as a renegade who's, you know, those pencil pushers, they wouldn't let me do what needs to be done, so now I'm doing it on my own, kind of thing. But in practice, he's almost as bad a pirate as the other guy, because he sees it as like, I'm just taking what I need to take to continue fight these awful pirates.
Yeah. This kind of thing where it's like they would raid like coastal towns for supplies and stuff.
Yeah, they call it, we're requisitioning these. Yeah, we're requisitioning these supplies. You know, I do not recommend that you stop us from this, but which is practicality exactly the same as what the pirates are doing.
Exactly,
sort of thing. But he's in his head is not seeing it that way. He's seeing it as like he's carrying on the good fight. What his government wouldn't let him do.
Don't necessarily have a forename, but how does Glower work for a surname for you? Free Admiral Glower. Because
Glower and Smiles,
that kind of like evil look about it, but it's got like it's an obscure enough word, and it's got a kind of like surname quality to it.
Yeah, that kind of works.
Just I'm racking my brain for more, but that's the one that. Oh. How's this then? Right.
Okay. Yeah.
If you give him the forename Sally, and that he's not in any way, shape, or form thinking of it as a woman's name, he sees no issue with it. But very few people know that his name is Sally, and he says he has no issue with people like knowing this, but he doesn't really make it known that that's his name.
He doesn't put it about now.
Pete knows this, and that Pete occasionally will let slip to somebody that he knows Free Admiral Glower's first name, and that when that goes around, it eventually gets back to him, and it's kind of like, oh, I know who told them.
Oh, that Pete Smiles. Sacre bleu. Yeah, no, I like that as a thing. Like I say, so he is kind of almost like a self-declared nemesis of him, sort of thing.
And it's for a really arbitrary reason, because this is really kind of like a guy who had authority who's now kind of lost his shit.
Perhaps it really is a personal thing, though, that like when he still was reporting to the kingdom, he was in pursuit of Pete Smiles, who just eluded him, and they got away with it. Until next time, Admiral, haha. You know, like he crippled the ship or something and sailed away.
If maybe Smiles pulled some daring maneuver.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
More than one ship or something that's going to make the guy lose his admiralty, where it's like, this was such a failure.
Yeah, like he pulled some real ridiculous Jack Sparrow shit. and disgraced Glower, who was called back to the capital, but refused to go because he sees it as like, no, I must hunt down this, rapscallion who has done this wrong, who has disgraced me. So just, and his men were with him because they were like, oh no, we're with you, Admiral. We will, we'll hunt down Smiles and put his awful crew to the sword and all this.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process, they sort of, abandon. But they don't know that they. No, they do know that they deserted. Basically, maybe there were a few who were like, "Oh no, Admiral, this, we've been called back. We must return to the capital." And he's going to, if you're not with us, then we'll put you in a dinghy and good luck to you, sort of thing.
Well, if he's that friendly,
yeah. Always saying, "Oh, mutiny, is it?" And
you'll hold them.
Yeah. So yeah, it really did start as like this is a big personal nemesis vendetta going on, that like Pete Smiles really did a number on him, and it's sort of like he sees red, and he's just like it's Pete Smiles is his Moby Dick's white whale kind of thing. He must stop him, sort of thing.
And he's just stalking the seas, trying to find him.
Yeah,
trying to get leads.
And occasionally he comes close, but like Pete Smiles is, he's the world's greatest pirate, and he's now in possession of the Tide Blade as well, so he can control water.
That's pretty good as far as okay, let's make the ocean push him away, and let's go away from it the other direction.
I may have made that artifact a bit overpowered, to be honest. But whatever. Yeah. But it's so this is a sort of ongoing rivalry. This is of our our pirate movie thing that we never see.
Yeah, I'm into it.
Yeah, I dig it. Okay, well, there's a good starting point there. So the final one then, a building associated with crime or justice. I don't know. I mean, we could just sort of talk about the era. I could sort of talk about the Arrowvale jail with an article about that, and talk about, I can just sort of mention the events that happened there before and things. But then that does seem a little bit sort of, there's a little bit of a sort of odd note to end this on, really, of like, and we'll just we'll talk about one building, but like
a generic jail cell.
Well, the thing is though, the prompt is right about a building. It's not usually like a building associated with crime or justice.
It's like high courts, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of a whole side of the sort of way that the setting is run that I haven't really put any thought into, to be honest.
Yeah, crime and punishment's one of those angles that I don't think, probably if our characters ran into it, wouldn't be a good thing necessarily for us to find somebody in authority that might take issue with what we choose to do.
I mean, obviously, we've already established there's jails, and like there's the city watch, or the town watch in Arrowvale was like two blokes, and that it's a small village. You're just gonna have a local copper sort of thing.
But I guess in the bigger places there might be like the likes of an infamous prison, like a Tower of London type place.
Oh, there is the Crag. We had the Crag.
Yes, Crag, of course.
But I mean, I guess there would be some kind of, like you say, like a kind of high court in a larger place, so maybe in each region. So maybe Arrowvale sends its, I mean, I might have even said about it, sends its any prisoners it might get to Lorana to face judgment, maybe. So there is maybe like a court, which I don't know whether that's going to be sort of, if we come up with the concept of judges, or whether that is something that's like one of the sort of local lord's responsibilities.
Might depend on the day to some extent.
Probably depends on the crime as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have the likes of like vandalism, petty crime, the kind of stuff where the cop is going to catch you. I would expect in this era it'd be more like you're going to get clobbered around the head with a car shot.
Well, there'd be like a magistrate who just deals with that kind of stuff. But the bigger crimes, a full court is convened with the Duke overseeing it or something.
Things get complicated as well in terms of like crime and punishment, where there's going to be a lot of spell casting potential to effectively negate a lot of the formal proceedings that we would need to have in our courts, where really you just need a trained wizard or somebody with capacity to cast the right spells to persuade or get the truth out of people.
This is a totally different spin on the court wizard.
Yeah, it's almost like they're the lawyers after a fashion, but instead of interrogating and kind of like cross-examining, they would instead be kind of like counterpointing each other's spells and being like, okay, so you've told him to tell the truth about this particular thing, but the way you asked him to tell the truth meant that there was space for him to incriminate himself. So I'm going to ask him another question.
Yeah, I mean, the zone of truth is a spell. I'm chuckling at the idea. I am your court-appointed sorcerer. Be here defending you today.
I mean, as I say, I think logistically that just has to be a thing within the framework of D&D and legality. Like, it has to be taken into account, because you can't have a courtroom full of your average, like, normal people that can't do any magic, and they're trying to, like, do something against a sorcerer. Because, as you say, like, anybody with magical capacity would be able to walk in and enthrall the room, probably. And that means there needs to be some kind of, like, authoritative magical presence within the room.
Yes.
Whether that means you could then potentially have a building where that's built into it, I don't know.
Well, maybe then, I mean, as a thing for this prompt, then, if we're looking at a specific building for it, I would probably build, like, the courts of justice in Lorana or something. And then there's plenty of scope in there to include in the description things like wizards' quarters or whatever, and the court. We can touch on all these things in that, and then expand them to other articles as we go, sort of thing.
I've got an idea just in terms of taking this magical stuff to, like, a little bit further with the building, and tell me if you think this is too much, but I kind of like the concept of, because you could enchant an item. You could enchant an item with some level of, like, there is the truth field or whatever built into it. But it's not like a constant, like, it's not actually 100% on all the time. It's more like this is some kind of, like, variant on the spell where, say, my thinking is maybe you could have an enchanted cornerstone of the building, and that this cornerstone has this version of the spell on it, and it's like you tell a lie and you feel physically ill a little bit. Like, your stomach turns, and that, like, there would be something built into it where, like, it's not necessarily painful, but there would be some indicator if somebody's lying all the time that you would just see it. Like, you'd walk into that, maybe a given room, so that it's not such a huge field or something like that. And that this would be a place to sort of, I guess it's an interrogation room after a fashion, but it wouldn't even necessarily be like a, well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the way Zone of Truth works is it literally compels you to tell the truth. But then the caster knows that you haven't... If you save from it, the caster knows that you've saved from it. So that would maybe be a thing of, like... I'm thinking less... like, part of the do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, is to have Zone of Truth cast. Because they'll know then if you're like, hey, no, you need to go along with this, or it doesn't look good. You know, that's not a good look to be resisting our Zone of Truth spell.
I was just thinking in terms of, sorry, just to bring it back to the cornerstone, and again, tell me if you think it's crap, but, like, the idea that you could have more than one building like this, that somebody somewhere produces the cornerstones and is the enchanter, and that this is part of the legal system, and then maybe, like, just in terms, like, out there ideas for, like, a storyline or something, trying to track down the guy who makes the cornerstones if you're playing as, like, bad guy characters trying to fuck with the legal system, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean that's quite I mean, to what you described there of, like, a thing that when you tell a lie you feel sick is quite a complicated magical enchantment type thing in D&D terms.
Such a kind of, like, such a specific homebrews, I guess. Like, it's to create flavour more than anything. Yeah. I'm not, even then, just that feeling of being sick is, like, I'm just throwing that out there, is like, maybe it's a little twinge in the head, a headache, your eye twitches. So there's something that would, like, potentially give you away to somebody else, and that you would feel constant discomfort if you were the person that was lying all the time.
Okay. That's something to think about, at least.
That's my concept, like it.
Yeah. I'll have a think on that, I think, because I say that adds a kind of another sort of twist to it of, like, is that part of the punishment or whatever, or is this like you said, a kind of thing to make people tell the truth in the court kind of thing? Yeah. I mean, in terms of sort of magical things you would have associated, I mean, there would be sort of, you would imagine the cells themselves would have enchantments on them to be like, no, you can't just teleport out of here. You can't, you know.
The cage is a little bit more than just a cage.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot to go on there, I think. Okay. As a sort of, as a starting point, we've got a few things I can incorporate into a building. And like I say, if I'm going to go to the, like the, I don't know what we'll call it, like the high courts or whatever, the Hall of Justice, I'll probably do Lorana rather than Valone. But each city's going to have, will have an equivalent, I think. I'm probably only doing Lorana because it's closer to where you guys are, but just on the off chance, so then I've at least got like an extra thing built out. Not saying that you'll go there or anything. This isn't a spoilery thing. It's just like it's helpful to me if there's a city that you might end up going to when we get back to it, if I have more things ready, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Other than just like, I guess there's a pub here and a shop. You know, I wasn't prepared for this. But yeah, that is all of the gold prompts. So I think we got a lot to sort of go on there. A lot of things to do. If I mean, I'm going to try my best, like I said at the start, to at least get the copper badge for this, which is to complete 10 of the prompts. I mean, over these last few episodes, we've kind of gone through basically, well, we have gone through all of them. If not come up with something for all of them, at least sort of most of them come up with like a starting point. So it's kind of on me at this point to go through and actually write an article. It only needs to be 300 words. So they're all things I can go back to later and expand on, sort of thing. It's just the matter of actually sitting down and go, right, okay, let's write this one, and let's write this one, and let's write this one. And it's very warm at the moment, and my brain doesn't always engage. So, but yeah, I think that's pretty much going to be it for today, I think. I mean, we've got one more, like I say, there's one more prompt left to be revealed, but that is not until Friday the 30th, which is obviously going to be after our release date for if we were doing one next week. So I don't know. My original thought was like, okay, so we'll do episodes for these, you know, copper, silver and gold, and maybe the fourth one we'll do like a sort of look back. But I mean, looking back on all the things, it'd just be a case of going back through what we've already gone back through. So who knows, we might be back next week with another one, or I mean, this is, like I say, 4 weeks in a row here. We've done pretty well. Yeah
Totally.
But anyway, yes, we thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in today. Thanks for joining me again, and as always, Eden. So yeah, I'd say we might be back next week. It might be in a couple of weeks. Things are we're still in that COVID limbo, despite all of the restrictions nominally being dropped and stuff. So we'll see what comes next. But yeah, thanks everybody who's tuned in throughout this month for our sort of play along with the Summer Camp 2021 event. If you want to check out any of the other articles and things that we've written, and just sort of look at anything to do with our world, you can, I think if you type, we've done this every time, haven't we, of trying to figure out the easiest way of getting to it.
A Google search for pretending with dice seems to be one of the best methods for finding a majority of things.
Yeah, I think if you Google pretending with dice World Anvil, that should get you there.
Yeah.
Easy-ish. Yes, first result. Yeah. So yeah, Google pretending with dice World Anvil. That'll get you to our page. I will, I think, also link it in the tweets for when I release this one. As always, though, as we said earlier, we've got our sort of separate world building channel on our Discord server. So please do join us on there. The link in our Twitter bio and on the contact page on our Podbean site. In the meantime, yes, as always, we're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Pretend with Dice. One of these days, I will remember to post on Instagram again. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers it.
You can find me at Monkey Magic Eden on Twitter and Twitch, occasionally streaming things, doing Talisman recent Saturdays, as well as Clone Hero, and getting near the end of Disco Elysium, but that might be done by the time this podcast comes out. We shall see.
Yeah, well, that's another reason for people to join our Discord server. You can join us in video games. As you said, mentioning Talisman has been with some people from our Discord server, so yeah, get on there, get involved. All right, well, we will, as I say, see you all next time. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll catch you later.
Bye.